Welcome to the Chase Hudson Show, a podcast dedicated to inspiring you to become extraordinary. Each week, we sit down with top-tier business owners, real estate investors, and influencers to inspire you to build your legacy. It's time to level up. Welcome to another episode of the Chase Hudson Show. Today, we've got Eric Kandell, founder and president of Low VA Rate Mortgages. We dive deep into how he got that company off the ground, his entrepreneurial ventures since his early days in college, and have a lot of fun along the way. He's got some crazy stories that we go into with Eric. It's a lot of fun, learned a lot, and with that being said, let's dive in. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Chase Hudson Show. We've got Eric Kandell in the studio. It's Kandell, right?
It's Kandell.
Kandell. Oh,
but
my
you
gosh.
and 99 other people out of 100 will say Kandell. I've even said Kandell just because people say it the way. But it looks like Kandell.
Eric
it's Kandell.
Yeah. Good to know. Thank you for letting me know. Cool, man. Well, Eric Kandell in the studio. So I'll give a quick bio on you for the folks listening to this. So Eric is an entrepreneur, founder, and investor. Eric started his career in the mortgage space in 2000, and 13 years later founded Low VA Rates, a full-service mortgage provider with a special emphasis on veteran loans. Low VA Rates funded over $2 billion in VA mortgages in 2020 alone. In addition to Low VA Rates, Eric is an active investor in storage units, startups, and amongst other ventures, which we will dive into. So with that, welcome, Eric.
Thank you for the kind intro.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for being here. So kind of one thing I ask a lot of my guests as we jump in is about your upbringing. So I've actually known you, Eric, initially before we got to know each other as the guy who's got the massive white house next door to my parents' house. And I've been like, dude, I've got to get to know that guy because he's doing something right. But before we kind of get to where you are today, want to understand what was your upbringing like and what should people know about, your childhood to understand who you are today?
You got it. Think of a Norman Rockwell painting or like a Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn upbringing. I was super fortunate. You learn as an adult, I'll probably jump around here for a little bit, that what you thought might have been a perfect childhood nobody had a perfect childhood. But man, I loved where I grew up. I grew up in Ohio, so I'm a Midwesterner.
Okay.
BYU brought me out here to Utah, but so my entire childhood was in Ohio. And it was a different time back then, man. You got up in the morning, during summer break, probably didn't have any shoes on, said, yo, mom. Dad was working. Well, my mom and dad both worked, which is kind of why I got into entrepreneurship. But hey, guys, we're going out in the woods. You would come back at 5 or 6 in the evening because you were hungry, covered in mud, scratched up. I loved my childhood. It was like the typical, what I would just say, country childhood, catching frogs, catching fireflies, or what else do they call those things? We don't have them hardly ever in Utah, but yeah, fireflies, fishing all day long.
Yeah.
And as I got older, small little country school. So if I wanted to letter in a sport, I just had to go out for that sport.
Yeah.
Like I got a little bit of an ego, as maybe some entrepreneurs do. So I hope I was pretty good at sports. But for example, I did gymnastics growing up.
Okay.
Not in this country school, but at a club. And as I got older, I wanted to be more involved in school sports. And I played soccer, and I did this like front handspring throw-in with the soccer ball. Nice. Just because of my gymnastics background, and I could just whip that ball, farther than like a corner kick. So one day the track coach comes over to soccer practice, and in a small school like this, the track coach is the, football coach and the track coach and the gym teacher.
Dude. Yeah.
And he's like, yo, Kandell, get over here. So I go over, and he's like, these guys say that you can flip around and you got that little flip throw in and stuff. How about you come out for the track team and pole vault? I'm like, okay, I don't know how to pole vault. Do we have a pole vault coach? He's like, nope, we don't. And very few schools in our district or region or whatever it was called pole vault. So as long as you can get up over the bar, we get an extra 6 points every meet.
There you go.
So you're going to be our pole vaulter. So I lettered in track, right? So why did I tell you that? Just that was kind of my childhood. Lots of fun. Better not forget the parents in case I ever forward them this podcast.
Yeah.
Loving parents. Best cheerleaders. My wife will tell you to this day, your mom thinks you can do no wrong. You've got her so tricked. I'm like, I don't believe that my mom doesn't think I can do any wrong, But yeah, my parents were always supportive. Always, hey, Eric, if you want to do something. They were the same with my sister. I have one sister. That's it. Small family.
Got it.
Go for it. We know you can do it. So
that's awesome.
Great childhood.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
Was there a point, either, you know, high school or as you were growing up, where you had, you know, any thoughts about being an entrepreneur, doing your own thing, or what kind of created, you think, that drive?
Man, I honestly think the example of my parents, my mom owned daycare centers. So she worked my entire childhood. My dad owned a ceramics business.
Okay.
They sold like potter's wheels and kilns, you know, the ovens. It was like craft ceramics. People, I always told my dad did ceramics, and they think, oh, he must have sold like ceramic tile or something. It was more of the art and crafts type ceramics.
Nice.
So honestly, from a very young age, I was always into business. This daycare center that my mom had during the summer, when the kids were out of school, they would have a day camp at our house because we had, I don't know, 10, 15 acres. It's different back in the Midwest than it is here in Utah. And I figured out I can go buy, you know, those icy pops, like those, you know, they're the ones you cut the top off. And so you could get those at like the local grocery store, 100 of them for like $10. So 10 cents a popsicle. And I learned, I don't even know how I learned it. You just kind of, I don't know if you're born this way, or again, to answer your question, if it's just because I saw my parents doing business. But when I first got the taste of, oh, I can make money, I would buy these popsicles. At the end of the day, when the bell would ring, so to speak, and camp was over, all the kids would go up to this shelter in our backyard, like this pavilion, wait for the vans to send them back to the nursery schools. Well, I would sell these popsicles for 25 cents, but I would buy them for 10.
There you go.
And so I could turn $10 into whatever it would be, what, $25? And I was like, dude, man, that's a lot of money for a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And there'd be a line. So it was that. My mom reminds me, I used to get toothpicks. I'd soak them in cinnamon oil, and then I'd sell them at school.
Okay.
So I just always liked selling stuff. I don't know where it came from, other than it was either part of the DNA or because I saw my parents running businesses. I figured, why not? But
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it, man. We, I just ordered some books by Andy Frisella. I don't know if you've heard of Andy, but he's got these books. They're called Otis and Charlie. And they're like Otis and Charlie, two bulldogs. They're entrepreneurial adventures. And they're for like, you know, 2 to 8-year-olds or whatever. And so I've got a 4-year-old, and one of them is called The Fantastic Fruit Stand. And it's awesome because it shows, you know, these two dogs in a fun way making a bunch of dough by selling fruit to their neighbors. And so I love that, man. It's something that I'm trying to, as a parent now, ingrain into my children of like, hey, you can earn $1, and there's creative ways you can do it, and kind of having that mindset. So I love
that's awesome.
Well, so you had great childhood.
Yep.
Had that drive. So you went to BYU, is that right? Okay. So take us from, you know, kind of college and figuring that out and where you wanted to go, what you wanted to do next.
Okay. There might be some crazy stories here.
Yeah, let's hear them, man.
Okay. But hopefully they're fun for the audience to listen to. So I came out to BYU. Freshman year was, you know, non-eventful. I mean, I loved it. I lived in the dorms. For the listeners that might know a little bit about Utah culture or Mormon LDS culture, I then left school for 2 years and lived in Chile for some humanitarian work, some missionary work. So as far as business, I mean, I knew even as a freshman I would study business, but other than that, I just lived the typical dorm life. If we circle back to non-business related stuff, you know, I had some fun as a freshman, but things really kind of from a business standpoint, or even getting the blood flowing more than as a kid selling popsicles. When I came home from my mission, I met this guy named Will. I don't know if anyone listening, if you know the name Will Farah, he unfortunately passed away. It's probably been 6 or 7 years now. But he was like this enigma in Provo, Utah. So again, if you don't know Provo, Utah, it's a little bit of a bubble. Right? It's not necessarily like the rest of the outside world, especially from my college experience. But why this kid was so interesting, at least for me, was he had dropped out of school. I don't even know if this is PC, but hey, we called his house the white trash house.
Okay. Because
he was from Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know why that matters, but that's where he was from. He had 4-wheelers. He had a boat. He never watered his grass, and he had this bright red NSX, which is a sports car. I'm not a car guy, but he had it just parked on his front lawn. in this dumpy house, but he had all these fun toys.
Okay.
And as a college kid, you're like, dude, what's going on with this guy? He doesn't go to school, and he basically has all this fun stuff. Well, it turns out that he does mortgages for veterans.
Okay.
And so this intrigues me a little bit, but at the time I was fortunate. I didn't have to pay for my college, so I didn't have like a need to work, but I just really liked this idea of making money. So this is way before 2007, 2008 housing and mortgage crisis. And so, you know, we're friends because I'm kind of, you know, not enamored, but I'm just really intrigued by this guy's lifestyle. And he's charismatic, fun. Everybody liked him. And I said, hey man, I want to learn how to do some of these loans. And so he gives me the rundown. At the time, you know, we were using I think it was like an HP 12B calculator. It's one of these calculators they teach you how to use in like finance class. And so I had to figure out these shortcuts and stuff on this calculator, how to calculate someone's current mortgage payment based on their interest rate. Here's what interest rates are now. They're lower than where you are. So here's how much we can save you. And so then, boom, we had a Quest wireless cell phone. This was before anybody really even had cell phones. Man, I'm aging myself. But people just didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
So we worked out of his basement, and we just kind of passed the cell phone around because I think for $100 a month, it was unlimited phone calls.
Okay.
And kind of the thing that we still laugh about today, people that are in the industry with me, is I get on the phone, I get a hold of this guy up in Layton, Utah, and somewhere in the beginning conversation, he must have asked me, hey, well, you know, this sounds too good to be true. How long have you been doing this? And so I just naturally say, oh, I've been doing this for a really long time. And this is one of the biggest savings I've seen from someone doing a VA refinance. Like, you need to jump on this.
Yeah.
And, you know, fast forward, we close his loan. He saves great money. And I get my first paycheck. I'm going to say it was like $1,200 bucks. But I like literally go to Wells Fargo with this check. And I'm like a kid on Christmas morning. I'm looking at my check. I'm looking at the teller. I'm like, oh, that chick's going to dig me. Dude, she's never seen someone deposit a $1,200 check. And so my blood's just flowing. And that was like the first taste of, I was like, I might have spent 45 minutes on the phone with this guy, tops, not even on the phone, just from start to finish. Yeah. And somebody's paying me $1,000. And that kind of triggered this, whoa, dude, you can make good money selling stuff. And, you know, like I said, I didn't have to do mortgages because I was fortunate enough to have my school kind of paid for. And I understood the need to work hard and get good grades. So I didn't want to like focus a ton on mortgages. But that's like the first real official dollar that I made in taste. I say real because I got a little off track. I got to tell you, this is a funny part of my college career, but it also kind of speaks to my entrepreneurship. Yeah. This is the part that I said might be a little sideways.
Let's hear it.
So when you're a Mormon missionary and you speak Spanish, like I did, you start meeting people when you come back that maybe also served their LDS missions in South America and stuff. And so we met this guy named Mike. And I'll keep his name out of it for now. But we met this guy named Mike who, similar to Will, just, you know, they say birds of a feather flock together. I guess a lot of the guys I ended up meeting and hanging out with at school were entrepreneuristic, salesy. They understood they just had that desire to make money. Well, he also was highly successful, but his was a little bit different, not so honorable, if you will. He had found out that he could go out to LA, to this place called the Fashion District, where if you've not been out to the Fashion District, it's not like glitz and glamour Beverly Hills. This is like warehouses and back alley where you get all the knockoff Gucci purses and fake Oakley sunglasses, and you get all this stuff. Well, I don't know if Oakleys are even cool now, but back in the late 90s, Oakleys were like the sunglasses. And so this Mike guy had found out that he could get Oakleys out in LA, bring them back to Utah. And if you know your typical Utah person, we love a good deal out here. And so I'm going to fast forward because I don't know how much time we got, but he basically had this army, me being one of his so-called sunglass soldiers, if you will, that he would give boxes of Oakleys. He'd send us to Nampa, Idaho, Boise, St. George. We'd all go out every Saturday early. We had to go convince a gas station attendant to let us set up card tables and a little, you know, sun tent in the corner of the gas station, and then we'd have these cardboard signs that say Oakley's $20 a pair.
Nice.
And I kid you not, the cars would just line up.
Oh yeah.
And we would ask him, we'd say this before we knew where he got them. We're like, Mike, like, how are you selling? Because they were legit looking Oakleys. How are you selling these things for so cheap? And he's like, well, here's what you need to do if somebody asks you. The guy I get them from says they're legit. Now, we can't promise that they're legit, but my understanding is they've fallen off a truck at some point, or they're scratch and dent. And so Oakley just needs to kind of get rid of them, but they can't sell them in their stores. So he has us convinced a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, we maybe convinced ourselves too, but this is the deal.
Yeah.
Fast forward. Dude, we would come home every Sunday as college kids. This is before I made the money doing mortgages with, I'm not exaggerating, $4,000 or $5,000 in cash.
Wow.
We'd lay them out on our beds and we'd be like, whoa, dude, this is like in the movies.
Yeah.
And then he'd let us keep 10%. It was a total honor system. We all knew each other. So I'd make $400 or $500 on a weekend. Mike would take $3,500 to $4,000. Well, entrepreneur blood kicks in.
Yeah.
Mike ends up getting an investment banking job out in New York, and he takes off, and our gig's up. We're like, dude, we got to figure this out. I speak Spanish. We know he's getting these things out in LA. I don't even remember how we figured it all out, but we get out to LA, we find the dealer, I guess. We're in the back of his van, we're loading up these, and this thing goes on for a good 6-7 months. We're now the middle guy.
Yeah.
And I've got all my roommates and friends and, you know, girls that we know. Well, it all comes to an end. I'm on 9th East, right across from Gold's Gym.
Know the spot.
I'm selling these things right at the corner, and up rolls this typical Oakley driver, pickup truck. Mullets are back in. I'm kind of sporting one right now. I don't know if you can tell, but
love it.
Before the mullets were, only Oakley people would wear these mullets, right? Probably from, I better not say where I think they're from, but these dudes pull up, they come up, same conversation as always. Hey, are these real Oakleys? Well, I can't promise you they're real, but look, it says, you know, made in the USA. It's got this little bag. You can wipe the lens. I give them the whole thing that we've been told is the deal. The moment they give me money, and I give them the sunglasses, boom, they pull out these badges.
No way.
Yeah. And they say, hey, what you're doing's wrong.
Oh my gosh.
I crumble.
Oh yeah.
I take them to my apartment. My roommate who's in on this with me, he's like, you idiot. Why did you bring them here? I'm like, bro, it's up, man. They're going to kick me out of school. Long story short.
Oh man.
They don't care about us. Oakley's like, they get me in touch with like their legal counsel. They're like, here's the deal. We're either coming after you, or you're telling us who you're getting these from, and you're never selling another one. I'm probably like, you know, tear in my eye, like, dude, I won't sell another one. I'm so sorry. Let me take you to my house. We gave them boxes of merchandise. I gave them the car to the dude. I called the guy up. I said, hey, I'm going to come out in like 2 weeks. We're going to buy some more. I have no clue whatever happened after that, but Oakley was cool enough to be like, look, again, these are counterfeit. You got to quit selling them. So keep this in your podcast if you want.
I love it,
This
man.
was 20 years ago. This was 20 years ago, but I tell this story all the time because, again, it was one of those things that I was like, okay, certainly you got to be ethical in business. I learned a hard lesson, but I realized, hey, if I can find something that people want, and somehow I can either produce it or procure it or find it for, you know, $1 and sell it for $3, man, you can make a lot of money. And that's just a fun story of non-listeners. Make sure you're not selling fake stuff, put it that way.
Fake Oakleys. Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. And to your point, I think business is all about solving problems. So if you can find a problem, people want, you know, good glasses at a cheap price, you can make money, right? There's just 1,000 ways to make money. And you also bring up, it sounds like you had some great entrepreneurial friends as you're in college. For me, I was in the business program and I was doing finance and accounting. And I feel like all the guys that I was surrounded with were all like, we're going to go to Big Four accounting. We're going to go to do investment banking jobs. And so it took me a lot longer than it sounds like you to kind of break that mold. I was like, I've got to go get this degree, get straight A's, go work in this job, get experience and do all that. But to hear you, and I feel like it's a pattern, you know, a lot of guys start businesses in college, end up dropping out of college, and are really successful. So I think that's awesome. What kept you in school? I mean, you had the mortgage thing going, the sunglasses.
I think it was back to that childhood, that upbringing. I think I would have really been afraid to let my parents down if I would have dropped out. And similar to you, Chase, I just assumed I was going to go to New York. I don't know why New York, but that's where the money was made, right? Yeah. I'm going to wear a suit and tie. I'm going to carry a briefcase. And I'm going to get in an elevator. I'm going to go to the top of the Empire State Building, and I'm going to make money.
Yep.
What kept me in college and in Utah, which ultimately ended up being a big blessing for business, was I couldn't meet a chick, man. I couldn't meet a good girl. And so the last thing I wanted to do was go all the way across the country and live in a city. So I was having fun. I graduated. Again, I didn't want to let my parents down, and I always planned on, just graduating from college.
Yeah.
Similar story, though. I remember, I graduated in 2000 in April. So this would have probably been like September. All of my friends, as you might know, and maybe you did this too, once they graduated, they were off. They went to their banking jobs, their finance jobs, or whatever they were doing. I wanted to wakeboard. I wanted to hang out with Will, the guy with the white trash house. He had the boat. This guy was fun. And, my parents paid for my college, like I said. And I remember literally getting a phone call one day, and I was out in Utah Lake when you could actually wakeboard out there. And Will kills the engine. He's like, bro, your dad's on the phone or whatever. So I probably climb into the boat. I get on the phone, and my dad's like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, we're wakeboarding. Well, it's September, Eric. I paid for your college, your insurance, your life. It's over. You've got literally, he's like, you've got a month to find a job or you're on your own.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. And that was kind of the springboard to not just closing 3 or 4 loans a month and then living like what I thought was a king at the time. I was like, we probably ought to start making this a little bit more legit. So it was just that phone call from a parent who was your biggest cheerleader and you looked up to. You got a 4-year-old son, you're doing all the right things. If we can create this environment where our kids want to make us proud, for me, that was literally the catalyst. I knew I would always go do something, but there was nothing really making me do it yet. I was enjoying kind of the easy life. And then, we get into it as the combo goes on, but that one phone call kind of woke me up.
I love it.
To you got to put some additional thought and maybe accountability. Yeah, I got the blood, I got the entrepreneur blood. I know how to make money. I can talk to people. But now that phone call made me say, time to be a little bit more serious.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I think inherently all of us want to make our parents proud, and, growing up with, it sounds like, both of us had really good set of parents and wanting to show them that we can do it and take that next step sounds like that's what you needed to get. Yeah, I needed it for sure. Into gear, man. So then take us from there. I mean, what ended up happening? You're slinging mortgages kind of on the side. How did that roll up into where you are today? Yeah,
great question. And that's really all we were doing, just slinging mortgages. Then you could take a couple of weeks off, maybe not really take weeks off, but you could live for a while on, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 as a single, guy living in just a small town in Utah. So that would have been like September, late fall of 2000. There was a big, our economy goes through cycles. We're in one right now. It's interest rates are going up, and perhaps we're going to enter this recession, and that's a whole other story. But so I've been doing mortgages for 22 years. Right. And if you go back and look at an interest rate chart or a economic cycle chart, right about January of 2001, Alan Greenspan was the Fed chairman back then. Okay. And he needed to cut interest rates because the economy was really struggling. I believe someone's going to check me on history, but the dot-com bubble had just kind of burst. Companies like Pets.com, who's like this example if you go study this stuff, and I was living it back then. Everybody was making money day trading. I think we had an E-Trade account. If .com was in the end of the business name, it was sure to go to the moon, and then this whole thing just fell apart. giving way to some recessionary time, some recession period in the U.S. And so Greenspan, in an attempt to spur the economy, he starts cutting interest rates. I think his first interest rate cut was like January of 2001. I remember going back to Ohio in the winter of 2000, so a few months after my dad had made this phone call, and things were starting to get a little bit more legit. I had got on the, I'd got with Will. I said, hey, dude, we got to get out of your basement. Like, let's stop selling mortgages in our bathing suits and hitting the lake during lunch. Like, let's go get an office. Mm-hmm. And this, to me, was exciting. Will was a little bit more unhinged. Like, he would have been fine just doing things the way he wanted. Sure. Taking nothing from him. He was really the visionary of this whole thing. But I took my college education and just kind of what I had seen my parents do, and I had dreams of employees, cubicles. I remember thinking, when you have cubicles and you have people in cubicles, you're successful. Yeah, yeah. So we had no money at the time. Well, I shouldn't say we had no money, but to this day, I've never had to go raise capital or borrow money to start a business. That's great. I remembered bootstrapping in college, learning how you can, get a credit card and bootstrap your business. So we go into this office in Orem. I say, hey, Will, here's the deal. Let me go teach my buddies and my friends how to do what you taught me to do, because I'm good at it. And again, go all the way back to the popsicles. If I can buy a popsicle for 10 cents and sell it for 25, game on. Mm-hmm. Well, Will was paying me at the time, I think 75%. It was a very fair split. Yeah. Any of my loan officers listening? This was a different time back then, guys. So, let's say we made, $1,000 a loan. Eric, you keep 750. I'm going to keep 250. And, Will would also sell loans, originate his own loans, but he'd just make a little override on me. So I said, let me go train guys to do what I'm doing. I paid them 50%. I kept 25%. Will kept 25%. And that's kind of how it started. And I had 3 or 4 buddies. They're, of course, loving it. I'm training them. And then again, back to the cubicles, I'm like, we need to have an office. We can't just wing this, but we didn't want to spend a lot of money. So we go to DI, again, for listeners who maybe are outside of Utah, this is like a Goodwill. It's a thrift shop. Sure. And we find these cubicles. They're like nasty grandma pink, and they stink, but they're cheap. So we get all this Febreze, we're spraying these things down, and we set up our first like legitimate office with phones and chairs and cubicles. Cubicles were the key, man. That was the key. And at the time, mortgages, again, were not heavily regulated. So we joined up with a company up in Salt Lake that had been around for a long time. And for lack of a better explanation for your listeners, we were kind of like a franchise. Okay. So we used their licensing, we used their name, but we went and marketed mortgages the way we knew how to veterans. Again, I'm patriotic. I love the U.S. I support the military. People always ask, why veterans? Just because that's what Will did. And so I got into it that way, and I've always done it that way. Yeah, okay. And so that was kind of the first step to now we're no longer just slinging mortgages out of a basement. Dude, we're making like a legitimate business here. And so I was a manager. Okay. And then a few years of that happened. And then we moved into a bigger office right across from Riverside Country Club in Provo. Okay. Had teams of loan officers. To this day, some of the ones that I hired back then were now business partners on other ventures. And it just, I don't know how detailed you want me to get, but it just little by little, I didn't just say, oh, I want to go start my own business. It kind of naturally came. Mm-hmm. So I'd say from like 2001, when Greenspan started cutting rates, till about 2003, we were just refinancing veterans like crazy, because Greenspan ended up cutting rates something like 19 consecutive times. Wow. For like 2.5 to 3 years at almost every Fed meeting, it was 25 basis points, 50 basis points, 75. And each time that happened, our pool of prospective, refinances grew. Sure. And we just organically grew the business to the point where I then became a partner with this guy, Will. Okay. That was the next step from sales manager, making a split off of just my team. But Will started hiring other managers. So Will also said, oh, I need to go find some more Erics, build some more teams. Well, I got nothing from what they did. In my blood, again, learning what I had learned and knowing what I had known. Hey, Will, dude, I want a bigger piece of this. I want to be your partner. So we partnered up. A few more years go by. He starts his own company. He's no longer a branch or a franchise of this company in Salt Lake. He now runs the show. I see him do that. At some point along the line, he goes his way, I go my way. I go join a branch with a company in Salt Lake, similar to what he had done. And then in 2013, I'm going to save the messiness because it's neither here nor there. We had a falling out,
Okay.
Will and I. And I decided, hey, now's time for me to leave. And I got to say this because if I don't, you asking about family, my wife, she was one of the big, like, I have some fear and anxiety. Might not get that from our conversations, but I'm kind of like, and I think this has kept me safe over the years. I always like, man, this could stop at any given time, or I could lose all of this at any given time. And so I didn't like to take a whole lot of risk. My risks, I was pretty risk averse.
Okay.
But because of the falling out, I didn't really have a choice, but I could have gone and stayed as a branch or something else. And my wife, Haley's like, Eric, you've been doing this on your own since the basement days, since she knew me and we were dating at BYU. Just go do it. You could probably do it better if you do it on your own. And I want to make sure I also give credit not just to parents who raise good kids, but for any of your listeners that are married. I think it's important to have a spouse that is also a cheerleader, right?
Yeah.
And not one that's just saying, oh, go take stupid risk. But I think that the fact that I was in a position where I really had no choice to leave that partnership with Will, but I could have gone down a couple different avenues. She was really the loudest voice of just go start your own thing. So I started my own mortgage company. We were a broker. We weren't underwriting loans. We weren't funding loans. We were just kind of a middleman between the veteran. We would put the paperwork together and then we would broker it like a traditional, broker would. Yeah. Over the next few years, we then evolved into a banker where we underwrite our own loans. We had to go get warehouse lines of credit. And, man, it kind of all came to a pinnacle as far as mortgages are concerned. And during COVID, the real estate industry and the mortgage industry, though at the front end of COVID, we all thought the world was going to end. Yeah. It was massive. We probably got to the point where we had 350 employees. We had probably $250 to $300 million in warehouse lines of credit, which means banks were giving us the ability to go fund, thousands of loans a month. We would close these loans, we would fund these loans, then we would sell the closed loans. So that is really becoming a full-fledged mortgage banker. Sure. We got to the point where we were doing everything other than the securitization of the mortgage and servicing the mortgage. We've never collected mortgage payments. We always sell the closed loan. And so you go from 2000, wakeboard shorts, basement, I've been doing this for a long time, to holy crap, in 20 years. And people think this success comes overnight. Yeah. You can start making money quickly, but to establish a full-fledged business with HR, employees, the whole gamut, for me, it was not overnight. It took a long time, but it was definitely worth it.
Man, there's so much we could unpack there.
Unpack whatever you want, man.
So I want to talk about when you decided to leave. So you're growing this business from 2000 to 2013 with your partner. You have a falling out, and you've got to make that decision to leave. It's actually very similar to kind of what happened with my former employer, and coming to a point where you had to make a decision. Are you going to try to do this on your own, or are you going to go try to find another job at a real estate shop or brokerage shop and make a salary and do okay? But what was that mindset like, and how did you overcome? You mentioned the anxiety and the risk. Take us into kind of that mindset and how you made that decision, how you came to that conclusion.
Mine's unique. I don't want to rob myself of the hard decision that was made, but for me, again, there was a catalyst. I was kind of in a corner. There was some financial disputes with the prior partner. But let's take that out of the ballpark, or take that out of the equation. I would have made a decision one way or another because of that upbringing. I always wanted to be my own boss. I always wanted to kind of be in complete control of my future. I don't know if this is for everybody, but people that maybe have some anxiety and fear, they're also kind of, and speaking for myself, I'm a control freak in the sense that it's been hard for me over the years to delegate. if we get to delegating in the future, if we get to delegating later in this conversation, those were huge milestones, because had I not finally gotten to the point where I could learn to delegate, we never would have grown to the point we got to, because you can only do so much.
Right.
But at the beginning, well, back to your question, what really was it? Self-confidence, looking back and saying, look, from the very beginning, in his basement to all the different milestones along the way, certainly not taking anything away from him and any of the other amazing employees that we had along the, but I just knew, man, I can do this.
Yeah.
Of course, there's some fear. I could lose some money, but I've been doing this for 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's really going to change? And again, like I said, having somebody or some buddies who can look at it from the outside and don't have your same fears and anxiety. Again, my wife just saying, do it. You're going to be better off doing it on your own. And employees that were mine and Will's employees together, dude, I'll come work for you. Are you kidding? Like, you're the main reason I'm still here anyhow. Mm-hmm. I think people just need to, you've got your own confidence inside, but when you've got outside people telling you to go for it, for me, it did make it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, or if you want to go deeper than that.
Great. That's great. And I think a lot of people feel like they need to keep learning. They don't know enough, or they don't have enough experience, and going out on their own. It's like, what if, I've never started a company before. I've never done it this way or that way. And there's so much that, you will never know enough. Like, if you're waiting for the moment where you're like, okay, I finally feel like I know everything I need to know about starting a business or going out on my own. And that's what I've learned, going out on my own over the last few months. It's been like, you have to learn on the fly, and you have to adapt, and you've got to be able to take that anxiety and that risk and, put it deep down and use your confidence, as you mentioned, to try to overcome that and take it one day at a time, to be able to push through some of that. And then it's been a wild ride, as I'm sure it was for you, but it's worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah. I would have just agreed that the hands-on experience is going to teach you. You can read all the books in the world. Yep. You can listen to all the podcasts in the world. You can do all the right things, and those are smart. Sure. Knowledge is certainly powerful, but there's nothing, and I think that's what's so exciting about entrepreneurship, is there's nothing as good of a teacher as just doing it.
Right.
I would not suggest anybody just jump head first into murky water, so to speak.
Right.
But if you know enough, your best teacher is going to be the experience itself. And you will fail. We've had some failures along the way. Getting outside of mortgages, when we get to that point of the conversation, I've had some investments that I've made in other people or other industries that haven't been the greatest. But you learn a ton from your failures. And as long as you're making a lot more wins than you are, failures, you're gonna be fine.
Yeah. I love it, man. And you mentioned your wife. I think that's huge. I've heard people talk about that as like the, home court advantage, or when you have your spouse and your family all in the same vision and same line as you are, it goes so far in terms of having that backing and that support on a daily basis to help you pursue your dreams. And my wife, McKenna, was in the same position. She had seen me for 5-6 years working at big banks and working at other shops, talking about, man, I want to do my own thing. Like, I really want to make that jump, but something had been holding me back for whatever it was. And for her to be like, you should do this. Like, you know enough, and it's so advantageous. So I would recommend finding a wife that's supportive, because it's going to help you a ton with everything you're doing.
Something I want to throw in before I forget that I haven't put enough emphasis on. For me also, it was just blood, sweat, tears, hard work. When you were bringing up the family and your wife, when I was first starting, and this will bring me also to this whole delegating conversation, we've always loved to travel. From the start of our marriage, we'd be that family in the airport with 3 car seats, 2 strollers, sweating all over the place trying to get to wherever we're going. And I remember one particular vacation when we were in Maui, and we either rented or we got on some sort of like catamaran or sailboat for the afternoon. for the day. It was like a half-day sail trip. And I remember coming back into the dock or the pier or port, whatever, and kind of looking at my wife and saying, whoa, it's already over? And though she was supportive all along the way, look, there's going to be some difficult times too if you are an entrepreneur that's really trying to grind it out, which for me was for like probably the first 10 years or more. She goes, and I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, you haven't looked up from your cell phone in the last 6 hours. And I legitimately, I was like, I looked around, I'm like, I'm in this beautiful, ocean. I've got my kids with me. I'm with my wife. What the freak? Like, yes, my job is allowing us to have these experiences, but I kind of just robbed myself and probably the family from these experiences. That was, I mean, I remember that one, I'm sure that happened 100 times, but I remember that time thinking, man, I've got to quit trying to do everything by myself. Within months of that trip, I remember I hired an operations manager because I'm a sales guy. I can motivate people, I can recruit people, I can train salesmen, but I wasn't, and I still am not the best at like the systems and the operations. And I remember finding a guy who's still with me to this day named Casey. I remember finding him through an account executive at Wells Fargo, said, yeah, I'll help you find somebody. You should go hire this guy away. I made Casey sit in I wanted to clone myself to the extent that I could. Sure. So he was like the first hire where I also paid like a pretty big salary. So it was like double pain. I got to teach someone to do what I do, and nobody can do it as good as me. So I thought, and I got to pay a decent amount of money. That's my money. I don't want to give it to somebody else. I'll just do it. But then I couldn't enjoy all of the vacations and everything else. So I bring Casey in. I'm like, dude, you're sitting in my office for the next 90 days. You're just going to sit here. Every single question that's asked of me, you're going to hear how I respond. You're going to watch how I do things. And at the time, I just figured he's going to just become who I am as close as he can. Well, it turns out he starts saying, well, maybe you could do it this way. And I don't know if that's the best way to do this. And I kind of looking at the dude, I'm like, okay, this is how it's going to be. Like my wife to this day will say the single best thing that's ever happened to her other than maybe me is you hired Casey, because
that's great.
That was like the springboard to me having some additional freedom. And he was better at it than I was. And I have no problem saying that now, because since then I've realized, I can hire all sorts of people that are better at certain things than I am. And so anyone that's starting their own business, or for you, I did it all from A to Z until I couldn't anymore. And though there was hesitation, I don't want to spend the money. What if they screw it up? Man, it was, for me, it was key to real growth, because then the company really started to grow when I realized, oh man, I can put better people in certain positions than even myself. So
I've heard that the best way to scale or grow is to fire yourself as quickly and as many times as you can and replace yourself.
That's a great way to look at it.
With somebody else. And I've worked at companies or seen businesses where the ones that struggle to scale are the ones where the person in charge feels like they have to be in every single decision that's happening. And it's, way too many cooks in the kitchen when you've got 10 people on one call, instead of delegating that to a decision maker who can just make the choice. As long as you trust them, you train them properly, it's the best way to scale and grow. And it's something that we're thinking about, because right now it's just me and my business partner. Just 50-50. It's two dudes doing it all, and we're already looking forward to the day where we can hire somebody to help underwrite a new deal, or go out and look at opportunities, or help grow our investor base. There's a ton to do. We just got to make some money first.
And I think
we're working through that.
Absolutely. Don't go do any of that stuff until you have to, and until you've made the money. But you know this, so
exactly. Well, cool, man. I wanted to get your quick outlook on the housing market today. So, I mean, the Fed raising interest rates. We're sitting here in October 2022. What have you seen since beginning of the year, and what are you thinking over the next little bit?
So I'm more of my outlook on the mortgage market, but as goes the mortgage market historically in my 22 years doing this, the housing market certainly is aligned with the mortgage market. So overall, I'm an optimist. I think the U.S. is the best place to live. It's the best place to own real estate, and we're going to flourish over time, like we always have. Short term, I'm a little negative, and that's hard to say because generally I'm just an eternal optimist. So maybe not even negative. I'm just a realist. The housing market has been so strong across the country, specifically here in Utah, that it has to slow down. But when you've got interest rates, just a year ago they were in the high 3s, even low 3s.
Yeah.
And now they're in the high 6s, low 7s. I don't see any reason at all to believe that the housing market's not going to cool off.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at I don't believe we're going to have a 2008, 2000, like we're not going to have a implosion of the housing market. But like where you and I live, or, you know, are you still up in Alpine?
We're in Lehigh.
Lehigh.
Yeah.
So same sort of area. Like I'll go on to realtor.com every now and then and just look. And it's been a few years since you've seen the little red arrow on the listing and saying, oh, price reduction, $50,000. I've seen homes, $700,000 reduction. Now this home had to have been way overpriced to begin with if someone's cutting it that much. But short answer, I would think we're going to have to see somewhere between a 10 to 15% correction in prices because people can't afford houses. Unless you're a cash buyer, how do you go buy $1 million home, which is kind of like the starting point, at least where I live, at a 7% interest rate? It's difficult. So people at my office ask me all the time, well, when's the Fed going to start cutting rates? I have a whiteboard in my office, and we're starting to take like gentlemen bet wagers. Yeah. And I put on there, not before October of 2024 is probably when you'll see the first Fed rate cut. And somebody else thinks September of 2023, so only 9 months from now. I think we're probably looking between 12 to 18 months before the Fed is forced to start cutting rates. And at that point, this whole party starts over again, right? Like people start refinancing, and then they have more cash in their pockets, and prices start to go back up. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's obviously cyclical. The Fed is just trying to kill inflation, and they've got to do it quickly. And
you think it's going to keep going up from here?
Inflation? I mean,
rates.
Oh, rates. Yeah. I think we're gonna top out sometime mid next year. You know, so we're looking at a deal right now in Dallas, and every day it's like I'm looking at the 10-year Treasury because it's going to impact what kind of debt we can get on this project, and you know, a lot of this is floating rate stuff, and so it's SOFR plus a spread. And when you look at the SOFR 30-day, you know, index, it's like that. It's projected now to get up to about 5% on a 30-day average. And so,
excuse me.
I think you're right. I think the next 12 to 18 months are going to be pretty frothy, and some pain that's going to come along with that. But hopefully we can get out of it without too much craziness. So
a lot of money is made when there's pain, though.
I know, and that's how we're thinking about it too. It's a balance of like we don't want to catch a falling sword, but I mean, there has been such a slowdown in you know the investment side of real estate because you know of the debt and a lot of these banks or lenders or groups that we'd partner with are just on the sidelines, and they're like, hey, we're not doing anything till the end of the year. We're just not. And so as long as you can find capital, I think there's lots of opportunity that's gonna come in the next six to 12 months.
And I'm sure that's hard because you just, I don't know, it sounds like relatively recently you've gone out on your own. You've taken this leap of faith.
3 months, yeah.
If you go to 2013, I think it was like August, September of 2013 when I kind of did a similar thing. It was not the best time, in my opinion, back then. I was a little like, rates are on their way up. We're in one of these upturns and downturns in the economy. Yeah. Things are slowing down. Rates are on their way up. And I was like, dude, this is not the best time. However, it also allowed me to take the leap of faith, if you will, when I didn't have to funnel a ton of money into the business. I could like slowly kind of dip my toes into it, knowing when rates start getting cut again, I know what I do best, and we can plug right in. So
yeah,
I remember thinking, man, it would be so much easier to do this when it's just making hay. But
right.
You know, if we were making hay, I probably would have been like, dude, it's way too good right now to go take a risk. So
yeah.
I think a lot of it's just mentality, but with your youth, you're wet behind the ears trying to start this whole thing. A lot of people that are your competitors, I would assume, who have made lots of money, it's a good time for them to just kind of, like you said, hit the sidelines, rest. They don't have their eyes on everything out there.
Right.
And that's kind of how I felt I was back then, because I had no choice but to keep making it work.
Right.
And so when the opportunity did come back, dude, we were in the market, we were there, and we could get the so-called deals way
right.
before anybody else, because we never left.
Yeah.
So
that's a great way and that's exactly how we're thinking about it. We're glad that we didn't start this, 12 months ago and buy a bunch of deals at the,
yeah.
peak, because we're seeing 10 to 20% price reductions on, where things were trading 9-10 months ago. And so
yep.
there's at least that discount. Where it ends up, falling to and flatlining is TBD, but yeah, we're priming and getting ready to take advantage of opportunities. So it's fun, man. I wanted to ask Eric, what, in terms of money, so you've had a lot of success, you're crushing it. What role has money played in your life? I mean, now that you've kind of secured the bag to some extent, right? How do you view money? How's that changed your life? How do you think about that?
Now we're getting deep.
It's deep stuff, man.
I'd be lying if I didn't say, look, I like money. Mm-hmm. I want to make more of it.
Yeah.
I kind of realized when people say, hey, you'll never have enough. Sure, I have enough to kind of live however I want to live. So for me, it's not even about, I need a bigger house, or I need my own plane, or I need this, I need that. I've always enjoyed making money. Mm-hmm. It's hard to explain. So what role, it's motivated me. Yeah. I mean, I hope it's not gotten to my head. I'm sure here or there, if you don't know me well and we all judge people from the outside. I've done it myself. Some people might be like, dude, you've got enough. It's not because I want more stuff or more things. I mean, I enjoy employing people. I love nothing more than when an employee will come by my office and be like, dude, like you've this company, not you, because there's so many other people besides me, but this job or this career has changed my life. Mm-hmm. I've really tried to look at money not so much as a way to just buy more things, but give me experiences that I otherwise wouldn't have. I mean, I love to travel the world. Trying to get back to really what your question was at its core. You can't let money get to the point where you're willing to, just burn down relationships. And we all have either experienced or heard of people who, their life's been ruined because of their love of money. I fortunately have not gotten to that point where it's like, at all costs, I just need to make more. It's really about, I don't know. That's a good question. I probably want to maybe based on some questions that you give me, we can go a little bit deeper. But
no, I think that's good. I mean, I think that's good. I've heard, because for me, it's like to your point, you had that first taste of like, hey, I just made some dough, and it was exciting to you. I've kind of been in a position where came out of college and I was always salary, like W-2. And like a bonus, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think I've yet had that moment. I mean, I've got some good bonuses here and there, but they're, slash 50% tax and, all this stuff. I haven't had that moment where I'm like, dude, this is like life-changing money, or like, this is legit. And so mm-hmm. I've been working kind of towards that, but I do think money is kind of an amplifier of who you are mm-hmm. already. Right. So I've been trying to be generous despite not having a ton to go around, or at least I feel that way mm-hmm. right now. But I feel like when you get money, I'm hoping that it can just be an amplifier of kind of who I already am. Like, if you're not a generous person now, without money, you probably aren't going to be that generous even when you get money, right? And so it's kind of keeping those things in mind. And I've asked that question to other people, and it's always interesting to hear the response of everyone kind of has the mindset of, I still wake up in the morning and put my pants on the same way as everybody else does. And it doesn't necessarily change who you are. It just creates freedom, opportunity, and amplifies who you originally were as a person. So it's interesting. Something
that you speak of, like generosity and giving back, whether someone can learn this from the podcast or when you get to that point where you have your life-changing money, which you're going to get to, when you start making that amount of money, you mentioned giving 50% of it up to the tax guy.
Man. Yeah.
One of the things that I've just started really learning and focusing on maybe in the last 5-6 years as the wealth has grown has been, how do I, number one, give as little of it to the IRS as possible, and how do I protect it so that when I'm no longer here, my wealth can continue to bless my kids or whatever charities I might be interested in. And one of the first real tax, what's the thing I'm trying to say? One of the first things that I learned years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, was, I don't know if you've ever heard of a donor advised fund or a DAF. Okay,
just recently, but yeah, I've heard of those.
So. No need to get into the details of it in the podcast. People can go Google it. But I had a person at the time that was helping me really kind of try to minimize. That's the word I was looking for. You're always going to pay some tax.
Sure.
Right? But minimize your tax burden. And one of the things was, hey, look, you already give money to your church in the form of, tithing, and that reduces to an extent your taxable income. Well, on a year or a deal, I don't know exactly how the commercial side of real estate works, but let's say you get this deal where you get this big old check. You're dealing with millions of dollars. Okay, I don't want to give half this to the IRS. Well, what my wife and I decided to do some time ago was we created the Kandell Family Foundation. It's basically a donor-advised fund where we could put on those years or on those deals where there was big amounts of money, whatever we wanted, we could put into this donor advised fund. And what's the greatest thing about the donor advised fund? What goes into the donor advised fund is a charitable contribution. So you've reduced your taxable income by $1 million or $50,000, whatever you put in there.
Okay.
And then that money sits in the donor advised fund and it grows tax free because it's a non-taxable entity. So where the market prior to maybe the last 6 months has just been on a tear for the last 5 or 6 years. Let's just say you went and put $1 million in there one year because you were trying to do some tax planning. 5, 6 years later, maybe you're close to $2 million. You've not put any additional money in there. And what Lovia Rates, my company, and our family has been able to do is we take these humanitarian trips. We take employees on them, or maybe in some situations we're just going to stroke a check. I really like getting involved, getting employees and or people into third world countries or into the homeless areas of the United States and doing the work itself. But you can fund all of that through your donor advised fund, and where you put $1 million in there to start, it's grown to $2 million over the last 5, 6, 7 years. It's just a cool strategy. When you do get that life-changing money, consider creating a donor advised fund, and then you can do all sorts of, to your point, you can give back, you can what goes around comes around. So similar to your what you were saying, the more wealth that we have been able to make, the more we've also been able to do good with it, not just buy stuff. But
that's great advice. Yeah. And I've heard of the donor advised fund, and I think that's a super smart way to do it in terms of tax benefits, but also giving back, and what goes around comes around. Cool, man. Just a couple more questions, Eric. In terms of habits, things that you've done either from college or now, or are there any things that you do on a daily or weekly basis or annual basis, goals or reading or things like that have helped you keep your mind sharp, or keep you on top of stuff? All
great question. I wish I read more. I really do. And now that I've been an official guest on a podcast, maybe after we leave, give me your, of course, the Chase Hudson Show. Is that what this is called?
It's what it's called.
Chase Hudson Show.
Believe it or not.
And 2 or 3 other top podcasts, because as we're talking, I'm like, dude, this is kind of cool. I know I could learn things from other guests of yours and or listening to other podcasts. I'm not a reader. I wish I would have been. For whatever reason, I didn't grow up reading. But to your question, some habits, and I've probably not focused enough on this in our podcast. If I went back to the very beginning, if I had to pick like the number one trait that I think has allowed me to be successful, for me, it's just been hard work. So I want your listeners to know that, like, you can have the best education. You can come from a family of entrepreneurs. You can be smart as the smartest person in the room, but I have seen through probably close to 1,000 employees over the last 20 years, but if not multiple hundreds, almost every single time, the most successful people, and that's not just employees, the most successful entrepreneurs I know, they outworked their competition. And so I would just make sure, like, for me, somewhere along the line, and I'll now answer the question directly, work ethic. I mean, I've almost always gotten up earlier than I needed to hit the gym. Mm-hmm. I'm accountable. If I tell somebody in the neighborhood I'm going to do something for them, or if I commit to an employee to handle something, this idea of not doing something that I'm expected to do just doesn't exist for me.
Yeah.
So again, habits, just working hard, not being lazy. I guess those two go hand in hand. Ice baths are kind of the cool thing right now.
Yeah, totally.
For the last few years, I have been doing ice baths.
Yeah.
You know, what else? And the other thing, you got to have fun. Like, I look at people that you can just tell they hate their job or they hate their work. Like, I know it's cliche, but work hard to play hard. Don't play hard, work hard. Like, you got to put in the work first. Mm-hmm. But I've always enjoyed what I do. Like, we screw around at the office. You know, I'm sure there's videos floating out there. One year, your ceiling doesn't have those tiles like a lot of commercial buildings do. But we had this Halloween scare contest for the entire month of October. And you had to record it. As we grew, I realized that there was HR violations. So we had people sign a waiver saying they wanted to be involved in it. And so the employees knew, you can't go freaking somebody out that doesn't want to be part of this. Because 3, 4, 5 years before that, dude, I was doing so many things that my wife's like, you got to quit doing that stuff because you're like a legitimate business now. You're going to get yourself in trouble. So anyhow, there's a video on YouTube out there somewhere. I have an air horn, you know, one of those compressed air horns. Yeah. I sneak up into, my brother-in-law worked for me at the time. I sneak up into the ceiling tiles, and I'm perched out up in there just waiting for him to come into his office. And in my mind, I was going to jump perfectly enough to where my feet were not going to hit any of the railing, but they were going to go straight through that tile. And I was going to pop down onto his desk and air horn him. Well, as I jump, my heels catch like the edge, and so I fall back. Oh, like, man. I'm sliding all the way down the wall, right to my butt on his table. I also tried to hit the air horn, but I was off balance or something, so the thing like frost bites me because of the compressed air. Yeah. So on the video, I'm like, oh man, that's burning. And so why do I tell you that? Man, I've always like I have an office job. That's not the most fun job. I sit at a computer. I'm on the phone. Again, cubicles full of people. Yeah. But when I will leave my office, you know, whether it's walking around on my hands from the gymnastics days or, challenging people who can drink their Red Bull the fastest, like, just have fun, whatever it is you're doing, but work hard first. There's so many people out there that life's all about having fun, and they struggle. They struggle all the time because it's like, dude, all you're doing is playing. You can't play if you haven't put in the time. But I've just always been a hard worker, and I think I got that again from seeing my parents always work.
I love it, man. I've kind of got a vision board and long-term goals, and a lot of them are like, hey, I want to do 4 trips a year, 1 overseas, like this and that, and it's a struggle. Because I'm like, I want to do the fun stuff, and I want to have that balance, but it's like we gotta first make some money, right? It's like, and to your point about hard work, I think I've heard that, you know, the harder you work, the luckier you get. You know, you're just putting yourself in a position by working more hours, getting in front of more people, talking to more investors, looking at more deals than the next guy. You're just kind of creating this energy that the world is going to throw something back your way at some point. Yep. So I think that makes a lot of sense, man. Well, what's next for you, Eric? I mean, you guys are, you know, growing, it sounds like. Yeah. And I mean, what do you see the next 5-10 years look like for you?
Man, you know what? If, well, I won't give any ifs because there are no ifs. The next 5 or 10 years, we're going to, on the mortgage side of things, low V rates is just going to probably hang on. for dear life. We're kind of white knuckling it right now, along with a lot of other mortgage companies.
Yeah.
The mortgage industry is going to struggle and they're going to suffer. They just are, for, like you and I talked, I don't know if it's 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, but what you learn as a business owner, when times are tough, you hunker down. We're not going to throw a huge extravagant Christmas party this year up at the Grand America with the casino tables and everything else. That's ignorant. Sure. Right? When we're having to let employees go that have been with us for 5, 6, 7 years, you can't in good conscience go out and just, waste money.
Yeah.
So on the mortgage front, it's business 101. Just cut expenses to where they're just under, just less than or equal to our revenue, and hope that we're able to survive until a much more friendly mortgage market comes up. That said, because of the wealth that's been created and the relationships that I've made along the ways, I've been fortunate to have diversified, if you will, and I don't rely just on mortgage income. So I'll continue down the path that I've been doing. I've got a great business partner from my college days who was one of my loan officers. I'm trying to make this quick because I know we're coming to an end, but he was one of the hardest working loan officers. He loved how I managed. We were friends. And he told me from the day he left doing mortgages and moved out to California, he got into senior living and worked for some big, I think the Ensign Group or some big funds that focus on senior living. He's like, hey, Eric, one day I'm going to leave like you did with your firm. And he goes, and when I do, I'm going to start my own thing. I'm going to learn everything I possibly can. I'm going to be the best in our company, and then I'm going to leave. Well, he did that. And he's like, but I loved working for you. I trust you. I'm going to come to you for some money. Well, we had a mutual respect, and I said, hey, Kevin, dude, when you're ready, I'd love to get involved. I know nothing about the nursing homes.
Yeah.
I was investing in him. I knew no one would outwork him. He was ethical, and I knew he'd take care of our money, and he's done it. So what's next? Great. We'll continue. We're invested in senior living, memory care, mobile home parks. I'll just continue to do maybe some deals with, your group.
Yeah.
But when the right deals come along, I am excited, though a lot of people are going to get hurt in this recession. If you can preserve your capital and you can wait on the sideline, like some of the people that you were just mentioning, I think there's going to be some awesome wealth creating opportunities inside of the next, 6 to 18 months. So I hope I can see those. They can come along, and I can put some money towards those things. Lastly, we've kind of pivoted a little bit because I have these employees that are loyal to low VA rates and they don't want to go anywhere. If your listeners own businesses, they've probably heard of PPP money. Maybe they took it during COVID. Well, under the CARES Act, there's also a little carve out in there called the Employee Retention Tax Credits. And so if anybody listening owns a business and you haven't applied for your ERC credits, employee retention credits, in the most basic explanation, if you had kept your employees employed during the height of COVID, so part of 2020 and part of 2021, if you kept them employed, there are 3 different ways that you can qualify to receive a lot of your already paid taxes back. And so we've been doing that on the side, kind of as slinging mortgages back in the day from the boat. We're now kind of slinging ERC credits to businesses, and it's growing. I don't know how big it's going to get, but it just seemed to line up perfectly with mortgages are slowing down. I've got staff. Businesses are sprinting to get their ERC credits before it's too late because that's going to run out. And so right now we're trying to grow our ERC business at the same time. But man, I'm going to keep working until I'm 65. There's no end. I like creating opportunity for other people. Like I said, I like making money, not because I necessarily need more of it, but I just really like to work.
Yeah.
So it'll just be kind of pushing forward, doing what I've always done.
It's great, man.
Yeah.
Being creative and getting after it. Last question. How do you define success? What does success look like to you?
Ooh. Hit me with these deep ones at the end. Well, it's evolved over time. When I was young, success was the big white house on the hill. Yeah. Success was, that guy's got the red NSX sitting on his dead lawn in Provo. He's got it all figured out. So I would say I probably have 2 different definitions for success. if you want to know if someone's been successful in business, then I do think that in its most basic form, if someone's able to create a lot of income through their business, employ a lot of people, take a lot of money home, financially, that's successful. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with guys making millions and millions of dollars as long as they're doing it the right way. Selling fake Oakleys on the street probably isn't the right way, okay? So we learn as we go. However, real success, for me, real success isn't necessarily tied to money. There's a lot of people that haven't made pretty much any money that I look at their lives and I'm like, okay, that's successful. So, you know, in a non-financial way, staying healthy, right? Having kids that respect you and that love you, having a strong marriage. Marriage is not easy. It's like running a business. How long have you been married?
I've been married for coming up on 8 years.
8 years. So you're getting there, right? Like at 8 years, there's ups and downs in 8 years. And again, just because somebody fails doesn't necessarily, whether it's financial failure or relationship failure, that doesn't also just mean they haven't been successful. I think it's when you do fail, whatever failure looks like for you, what do you do with that failure? If you just mope around and complain about it and do stupid stuff because you're coping, that's not probably real successful in my book. But if you can, you know, get yourself up, wipe off your shoes and move forward and take that success as a learning experience, I think you're good. So just success, treat people right. When you're not around and there's a group of people talking about Chase Hudson or Eric Kandell, if they're saying positive things about you and people want to be around you, and that's success for me, is how do you treat other people, and, you know, what are your relationships like?
I love it, man. That's a great way to end it. If you guys are listening and want to learn more about Eric, follow him on social media. Yeah. You actually have some pretty solid content, man.
Do I?
Yeah, the travel stuff, the food. It's good.
If you like food and you like travel, my content, you know, what I don't do a lot of is, because of my business, I don't need to have a real strong social media presence as it pertains to, like, you know, financially winning. Sure. But if I can help any of your listeners, they can look me up on Instagram or wherever and hit me up. If you need a mortgage, low VA rates, baby. Low VA rates. We do mortgages not just for veterans, believe it or not, though our name kind of pigeonholes us, and that's fine. Our focus is the military. We can do mortgages for anybody, so hit us up. Cool. Thanks for being here, Eric. You're right. I'd love to be back maybe in a year or two or whenever you want and see how things have changed. Absolutely. All the luck to you guys, too. All right, man. Thanks a lot. You got it.